When I was in my mid-20s, I worked night shifts at a 7-Eleven. I was still doing online school at the time, and I figured most of my shifts would be slow enough for me to get some schoolwork done during my shifts. For the most part, this actually worked out. I'd be the only one there, and it would never really get busy. Whenever someone would come in, I'd just push my laptop aside, and when they left, I'd continue my school stuff. This night, it was very cold and rainy outside, which always made me happy because almost no customers would come in. I had my laptop out and was focused on school for almost 2 hours straight when the front door opened and a man walked in. He looked 30 with a beard and short hair. I put my laptop off to the side and waited for him to come up to the counter. The man looked around the aisles for a minute or two, then walked out, got in his car, and left. Not thinking too much about it, I grabbed my laptop and continued about my work. Another 30 minutes passed, when out of the corner of my eye, I saw headlights pulling up in front of the store. I looked over and was confused to see the same car that was here earlier. I thought maybe it was just a coincidence, but when the guy got out, it was the same man. This time he walked into the store and came right up to the counter before I could even move my laptop. "Restroom?" he asked. "Oh, yeah, it's right over there." I wasn't expecting that question at all. He walked over to the restroom and went in. It was one of those single-person ones, not like a whole room. I couldn't help but think it was a bit odd to come back 30 minutes later to just use the bathroom. Like there had to be somewhere closer to wherever he was, unless he stayed in the area for the whole 30 minutes. He possibly could have been back to also grab something that he decided he needed. I don't know. I waited a couple minutes, and then a couple more, and then it started to get a little unusual. Honestly though, I did not want to be that guy who checks up on him, or knocks on the door, or whatever. Another 15 minutes passed, so he'd been in there for almost 25 minutes at this point, when a police officer pulled into the parking lot. He circled around and slowed down right behind the other guy's car, clearly inspecting it. And after a little bit, he stopped his vehicle right behind the car and got out. The officer came into the store and looked around the sales floor, then looked at me and asked if I knew who was the owner of that car outside. The officer looked more than just curious. He looked worried. I pointed at the bathroom and said he'd been in there for a while. The officer went over and didn't hesitate to begin banging on the door. It was clear something was seriously wrong. After a minute of him knocking and yelling, he looked at me and asked if I had a key to the door. I was kind of shaky, but I sifted through the drawer under the counter and found the key, then ran it over to him. He unlocked the door and opened it, gun raised. The room was empty. I couldn't believe it. After getting interrogated for a minute, I assured the cop that he had gone in there and never came out. The officer did a more thorough search and happened to notice the ceiling was accessible. It was one of those ceilings that's made up of panels where you could just push them out. I guess the man had gotten on top of the sink and was able to haul himself up. The officer called in backup, and within 15 minutes, they found the man hiding inside the ceiling. They got him out and arrested him. As I've been told, the guy was on the run after doing some absolutely horrible things to several random and innocent people. Earlier in the night, they got a description of his car and caught his license plate on a store camera. The officers made it seem like I was lucky because the past individuals he had harmed were all alone in the middle of the night, either working or just walking around outside. Whether the man was trying to hide in the ceiling because he knew the cops were after him, or he was doing so to try something on me, is unclear. Thankfully, he's locked up for good though. I'm a security guard for a mid-sized office building. It's located right in the center of the city. Around here, crime rates are pretty high, so it's not uncommon for businesses to have huge losses from break-ins at night. I usually have a coworker with me, but during this month I was alone while the company I worked for was training up a new employee. I didn't mind it at all though. Being alone was more boring and made it harder to stay awake, but having a partner sometimes could get annoying, depending on who it is. Anyway, it was around 2 weeks into this month when I was patrolling the lot like usual and noticed a couple guys far off on the other side of the road. They were standing around in the dark, looking in my direction. I don't know if they were looking at the building or watching me, but it gave me an uneasy feeling. The next time I made my rounds, they were gone. I took a mental note of it, but I didn't think about it too much. The rest of the night was quiet. I got out at 6 a.m. with nothing more to report on. The next couple days were uneventful as well, but then, one night at the end of the week, I made my rounds outside and saw them again. They were in the same spot as last time, standing in the dark and watching me. It made me uncomfortable again, so instead of continuing my rounds, I stayed out on that side of the building. Maybe if they saw that I noticed them, they would leave. I stood out there and walked back and forth for about 5 minutes before the men walked away. As I was out there, I tried to take notes of what they looked like, but there really wasn't much I could make out from that distance. I stayed out for another 10 or 15 minutes after they left, making sure they didn't come back. Then I went back inside. With them gone, I figured now was a good time to head to the break room and take my lunch. It was about 1 a.m. The break room was at the far end of the hallway in the back of the building. I sat at a table and started eating while scrolling on my phone when I suddenly heard a noise. I put my phone down and looked at the door to the hallway. I'd never heard any noises like that before. After a few seconds, I got up and walked over to the doorway. I stood there for a good 30 seconds, waiting to hear anything, but it all seemed so quiet that I figured it must have been nothing. I went back and finished my lunch. Afterward, I went to the security office and double-checked that there were no alerts or flags. Everything looked good. Usually this was the time of night where I just sit in my chair and wait around, but something in me felt like going to make another rounds. The noise I heard didn't have me nervous though. I think if anything, I was actually just more curious about what it was, and found it as something for me to look for while I was bored. I started my rounds outside, walking around the building. It was quiet, just the ambient sound of the buzzing streetlights. Nobody was out there. I went back inside and started walking through the inside of the building. Usually, unless there was a flag or alert in the system, I wouldn't go checking every inch of the place. I'd just walk up and down the hallway and make sure nothing was off. The hallway was long though, and was in the shape of an L, so it was more like 2 long hallways. On one side was the main door, and on the other side, there was a door to a mini stairwell that had an emergency exit door. It was one that was original to the building, so one of those old heavy metal doors. And as far as I knew, it wasn't connected to the security system because of how old it was. To bypass this, the company just put a huge padlock on it and bolted it shut to essentially make it useless. However, when I got to the end of the hallway and looked through the door window into the stairwell, I was in complete disbelief. The padlock was snapped in half, laying on the ground, and the metal door had been forced open. I felt lightheaded as I hurried back to the security office. If someone had broken in, how the hell did they slip past me unnoticed? Surely I would have seen or heard them. I started scanning through the tapes. I got to the point where I was standing outside, watching the 2 men. After they left, I stayed for a bit to keep watch. During that time, they came around to the back of the building and snapped the lock off, breaking in and going into the workrooms. Disturbingly, they were still inside the building when I came back inside. One of them was just on the other side of a door, literally 2 feet from me, as I walked past him and into the break room. While I was in there, one of them bumped into a desk while trying to hide, which was likely the sound I heard. When I went back outside to do my rounds, that's when they made a run for it. On the tapes, it was pretty clear that they both had weapons, either large knives on their belts, or possibly even small firearms, which makes me think they were prepared to take me down if it came to that. I called the police and handed over the tapes, but nothing ever came of it. They weren't great quality, and the men had their faces covered. The company claimed several hard drives, or files or something, were taken, and they seemed pretty worried about it. However, to this day, there's been no more info on the men or their motives. I work night shifts at a hospital, specifically in the ER. I'm the front desk worker that typically checks people in, though we still see a lot of crazy things here. Each night is unpredictable. This night started out quiet. We had a few people come and go, but nothing too big happened. I was mostly sitting at my desk talking to my coworker, Amy, about whatever we could think of talking about. Around 2 a.m., Amy went on break to go to the cafeteria, so it was just me at the front counter. Really soon after, like not even a minute after she left, a man came through the front doors. He was wearing a black zip-up hoodie and black jeans. His hair was dark and somewhat long, and looked unkempt, like he hadn't showered or maybe had just woken up. He walked up to the counter slowly and had this strange aura about him. It made me feel unsettled. "I'm looking for Hannah Smith." I didn't remember the exact name he gave, but it was a woman's name, and as far as I knew, they hadn't been admitted recently. Still, I checked the records, but I saw no one by that name. The man seemed uncomfortable as he waited. I told him there wasn't anyone here by that name, and that he may need to check other hospitals in the area. He awkwardly nodded and walked out. I glanced at the security guard, who was standing at the other side of the room, and we both made that eye contact, agreeing that that guy was a little strange. A half hour later, Amy came back. The rest of that shift was quiet and slow. I got out at 4 a.m., saying bye to my coworkers and heading out to the parking lot. This wasn't the largest hospital, but the parking lot was really oversized. It was huge, and all the workers were supposed to park in the back to make room for patients closer to the building. As I walked to my car, a weird feeling came over me, and I randomly thought back to that man that came in earlier. I don't know why, but I suddenly felt unsettled again. Maybe it was the eerily quiet parking lot at night. I walked a bit faster, got up to my car, and got in. I tossed my bag on the passenger seat and started driving. I lived about 20 minutes away. The roads were long and empty, but throughout that drive, I still couldn't shake the strange feeling. I felt like I was being followed or watched, yet every time I looked in the mirrors, nobody else was on the road behind me. When I finally got home, I pulled into my driveway and parked, getting out and going in through the front door. I hadn't even taken my shoes off yet when I heard footsteps sprinting up to the porch. They got right up to the door and immediately shook the handle, trying to open it. Thankfully, I always instinctively lock the door every time I open or close it. As soon as they realized it was locked, they stopped. There was a pause before a familiar voice spoke. "Excuse me, ma'am, can you please open the door? I need help. Please, open the door." It was the creepy guy from the hospital. I didn't respond and shakily took my phone out and called the cops. Seconds later, the man bolted away. I looked out the peephole and saw him run down the road and disappear in the dark. but confirming it was definitely the same guy with the black hoodie and black jeans. When cops arrived, I was hit with probably the most insane, creepy, and downright horrifying information. The back door to my car in my driveway was open. He had been in the back seat the entire drive home, which explains how he got up to my front door so fast. Even more disturbing is that he was probably hoping I'd park in my garage, which would essentially give him access to my entire house that night. Parking in the driveway probably caught him off guard and likely saved my life that night. They used the footage from the hospital CCTV to identify the man and found him a few days later. He was some nobody that I'd never met in my life, but he had some strange fixation with me. He had stalked me from outside the hospital for weeks, figuring out which car I drove, and probably just trying to find a night that I accidentally left my car unlocked for too long. Even though he was caught, he never admitted to anything, and just repeatedly said that he wanted to talk to me, and that was it. This was a while ago, but I haven't heard or seen anything about him since.
This happened just about a week ago. I'm 20 years old, and I live with my parents during the summer. However, they went out of town for some of their friends' wedding, and I wasn't invited. This was fine with me though, because I didn't really know the people anyways, and it's kind of fun to have the whole house to myself. We have a split-level house, and my bedroom is at the front end of it. But on Friday night, I stayed up really late watching a movie in the living room. I like that TV better because it's much bigger than mine. The couch in the living room is also super comfortable, so I just decided to sleep there for the night. Anyways, I woke up Saturday morning, and it was still super dark in the house. In the living room, we had a sliding glass door that connects to the deck in the back. The blinds were covering most of it, and that's the main source of light, but there was maybe a 5-foot gap to look out, and I saw that it was raining. I then looked at the clock, and it was almost 9:30 a.m. I was just sitting there on the couch and turned on the TV, when all of a sudden I heard 2 knocks at the front door. They weren't really hard knocks, sort of light, and immediately my heart started pounding. I know it's not a big deal just to get knocks on the door, but we lived towards the end of a dead-end road, and our neighborhood was very quiet. It wasn't very big, and it was extremely rare for anybody to knock on our doors for any reason. Maybe it's also because I'm a shy person, but it made me really nervous for some reason. From where I was sitting on the couch, I was just barely around the corner, and I couldn't see the front door. And whoever was at the front door probably couldn't see me. At least I was hoping they couldn't see me. I was wondering who it could possibly be, especially in the middle of pouring rain. Then I remembered something. I had ordered an Amazon package and was expecting it today. Suddenly, I felt so much better and started to relax. I opened up my Amazon app on my phone and clicked on my orders, expecting to see that it was delivered. But when I looked, it said it wouldn't arrive until 5 p.m. that day. Suddenly, I went back to being super nervous. I decided to carefully look out and see if anyone was at the door. It had now been maybe a minute or two since they had originally knocked, and they hadn't knocked again since. I slowly moved to look out the window, and when I did, I saw that nobody was there now. This made me feel a little better now that they were gone, but right at that moment, I heard the noise of somebody walking up the stairs of our back deck. I couldn't see because of the blinds covering most of the sliding glass door, but I then heard footsteps on the deck. I started shaking, and the next thing I knew, I saw a man appear in the opening of the sliding glass door where you could see outside. He was staring right at me, but had no expression on his face. He was bald and wore a black jacket and black pants. The guy then tried sliding the door open. Thankfully, it was locked, but I knew if he really wanted to, he could probably break the glass between us. I ran away into the bathroom that was just down the hall. I had no idea who this guy was or what he was doing here. I had been right to be so nervous about this for seemingly no reason. As I closed the bathroom door and locked it, that's when I heard the first loud bang against the window, as if he was going to try to break it. I knew I needed to call the police, but then I realized that I didn't have my phone. I had left it back out in the living room. I heard another loud bang from the window, but I didn't hear glass breaking. I knew it was a risk, but I opened the door back up and ran out to the living room couch. I looked around frantically and finally saw my phone. Then I made another mad dash for the bathroom. As I was, another bang came from the window. I looked back at the man as I ran. I saw he had been kicking at the glass and trying to break it. I got back into the bathroom and locked the door again. Then I called 911 on my phone. As soon as the operator answered, I told them everything. They told me to slow down and repeat what was going on. That's when I heard the sound of glass breaking. I repeated what was happening as best as I could, and just after that, I heard the sound of the man starting to walk inside the house. He was walking straight for the bathroom that I was in. When he got to the doorway, he tried the door, and it wouldn't open because it was locked. I backed away from it and went into the shower. The 911 operator said that they would stay on the line with me, which made me feel a little bit better because I was terrified. The man then started to bang on the bathroom door, and my phone suddenly went silent. I looked at it and saw that it had died. I hadn't plugged it in the previous night. I figured the man was kicking on the door the same way he had been kicking on the sliding glass door, and I knew he would probably break this as well. I heard him walk away for a minute and then go down the stairs that we had. He was gone for maybe a full minute, and then I heard him return. There was another loud bang against the bathroom door, but this one sounded much harder. I think he had found one of the baseball bats we had in our house or something. This made me even more terrified than I already was. I grabbed the towels we had in the bathroom and covered myself. I then went into the small bathroom closet we had and closed that door. I just barely fit in there, but I had to do what I could. The guy hit at the door a few more times, and it really sounded like he was breaking it now. But that noise was interrupted by another one. It was the noise of a loud knock on the front door. I could barely hear someone shouting police. I hoped they would be able to get inside fast, and just after that, I heard the man walking away towards the back of the house where he had gotten in. I stayed hidden, and a short time later, I heard a bunch of shouting. Eventually, I heard someone yelling, "Put it down." When I finally heard the voice of multiple officers inside my house, I finally came out of the bathroom. They had literally gotten there just in the nick of time, and the man had been caught. I'm really lucky how fast the police were to arrive that day. This was very recent, and I'm still a little shook up about it, but I'm just happy to be okay.